have been here last month at the Food to Table event. Today we're going to continue with the conversation about federal farm policy. And the reason we're doing that, I recall sitting in on the discussions when the committee that was working on the book read sessions talked about, so what are some underlying issues that maybe don't come out directly in the book, but nevertheless there's some implications, there are some kind of assumptions that are made. And one of the implied assumptions, I don't know if you've necessarily picked up on that, is that the role of the federal government in food policy is very significant, as well as the role of major agribusinesses. And I think this may be a bit overgeneralizing, but there's kind of an assumption that because of federal farm policy, because of big agribusiness, that has driven to get big or go home. And kind of the sense that in agriculture you have to constantly keep growing. Your farms have to keep getting bigger. Your business has to keep getting bigger. And a lot of that, again, there's the implication by the author that a lot of that is driven by federal farm policy. I think it's appropriate that we're doing this over lunch. And you may think, well, federal farm policy has nothing to do with me. I've never been involved in agriculture. But the fact that you're having lunch right now, the food that you have right in front of you has been impacted by a lot of these decisions. In terms of the price of food, the kinds of foods that we have, even the extent to which transportation systems have been put into place. So it may not seem like the connection is there, but the more you delve into things, the more you find that a lot of things that impact us on a daily basis, there are ties to the role of the federal government. We have a panel with us today. We've talked about some questions. We're just kind of what we would like to do is focus on what is federal farm policy, and it's a lot different sometimes than most people realize. But then ask some questions about, so what difference does it make? Does it have an impact? Does what we see match with what the author is saying as you read the book? And we're going to bring it a little bit closer to home here to this part of the state. We have folks on the panel that can speak directly to that. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I will tell you that one of the things that's unique with Dakota College at Bottineau, we're one of a handful of schools in the state that work directly with farm families, and we have instructors that travel out to their locations. They work with them on production decisions, enterprise decisions, help them kind of take a look at how their business is functioning, and actually assist them. And we work directly with farm families. We also have two producers that are with us involved in food production in a little bit different fashion. I'm going to let them share their experiences with you. So I'm going to just start and just to move into things, Stephanie, and then we'll go to Keith and so on down the line. Just tell us a little bit about you and how your involvement in agriculture.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Bloomhagen. I work here at Dakota College. I'm the grant writer for the college. So that means in my work here, I write federal grants, which come from federal farm policy. And those grants, some of those grants support our Entrepreneurial Center for Horticulture, our aquaponics program, and our Sustainable Vegetable Production program, and our horticulture programs. And also personally, I grew up on a small grain farm near Drake, North Dakota. My parents spent 30 years selling federal crop insurance. And I have a business called Meadowlark Granary where I take the wheat grown on our family farm, I mill it myself into flour, and I bake whole wheat bread, which I sell at farmers market. And that business is funded through a federal value-added producer grant, which I'll speak a little bit more about later.
My name is Keith Knudsen. I'm an instructor here at Dakota College. Can everybody hear us? And we're okay with that?
A little bit louder.
A little bit louder? Okay. So I've been here for 5 years now, and my main area of work is instruction as far as vegetable production, farm business management, and most recently aquaponics. I grew up on a farm near here, about 5 miles east of Bottineau, and I grew up on what we call a diversified farm. On the farm we had livestock, mainly cattle and hogs, and then we also had a large laying hen operation, and then we had crop production, but it was mostly small grains that we had. And when I was in high school, we started with some sunflowers. So that's kind of my background as far as I was growing up. But since that time, I've always been involved in farming, and I have about 400 acres of hayland that I put up every year. And then in addition to that, I do grow vegetables, and I sell vegetables at the Botno Farmers Market here. So I've been involved in that part of it too. Had some involvement with some of the programs, and we'll talk about that when I go through it, but particularly when I was in the crop farming end of it, had some involvement with some of the federal crop programs then. And then most recently with the vegetable production program, our latest Agriculture Act, which came out in 2014, mainly involved with the Food Safety Modernization Act. And we will talk about that too.
Okay, my name is Ellen Grader. I'm a farm business management instructor for Dakota College. I coordinate the rugby program. A little bit about myself. I've been teaching farm business management education for over 40 years now. I don't want to date myself, but I always think of myself as 26. I didn't even get a chuckle out of that. Anyway, as far as my experiences in this particular field, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of various farm producers, not only in the rugby area, in the north central part of North Dakota. I started out teaching back many years ago in Cooperstown area. As far as my upbringing and everything, I'm a native of Mandan, North Dakota. I'm kind of a little bit different than your everyday ag teacher in that I didn't grow up on a farm. I actually was raised in the city, and most of my experience comes from the rest of my family was in ag production in South Carolina, so I spent a lot of time on the farms there. As far as the experiences and everything, I always like to say this, in the last 4 years I've seen a lot of change in agriculture. We've gone through the drought of the 80s with a lot of our producers, a lot of hard times. Just the overall picture of agriculture has changed tremendously over this last few years. Other than that.
Good afternoon. I'm Rodney Armstrong. I'm Al's colleague up here in Botno. I run the farm business management program here at Botno for Dakota College. I've been here for a couple of years. Prior to that, I taught farm business management over at Langdon for Lake Region State College. I've been doing this for about 9 years. I think it's kind of interesting. 3 of us actually did grow up on farms and doing some farming. I grew up on a dairy farm actually, so different from the others here. Primarily dairy, we also raise small grains, but we're basically a dairy farm. So I've had some experience on the farming side, having to work with federal farm programs, and from that side too. I did farm myself then ran the dairy down there for 22 years before I decided to get out of that business, is when I started teaching farm business management.
Okay, I think with that, we'll just jump right into kind of the next step. One of the things I would point out is that we have folks that actually have a lot of experience, but we're not experts, or this group is not asked to be experts on federal farm policy. What I think we're going to be providing is more, what difference does it make to a farm family in the area? So this is not about what is federal farm policy, how does it work, what are the nuts and bolts of that. It's what impact does it make, and how does that ring with what the author is saying in the book that you've been reading? And so I guess that's really the question, or maybe the thing we would ask you to think about. Does what you hear match up with what you read in the book? And so those are the perspectives that you can have. I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and Keith is going to walk us through a little bit about
what federal farm policy is.
Okay, so today's federal farm policy has changed quite a bit from what it originally was, but President Obama stated it fairly well. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It's got a lot of different functions and tools to it. Just going through those, health and nutrition is a big part of our farm food policy, and I'll show you that pie chart in a minute here. And when we talk about health and nutrition, we're talking about providing food and nutrition to the people in our country. The research is an important part. We're always looking at researching different varieties of plants and to try to improve production and fight against certain diseases and insects and that type of thing. So we have what we call land grant colleges that receive a lot of funding for those types of things, and also even Dakota College receives funding for a similar type. Of course, jobs are always important, and if we look at our infrastructure, it takes quite a bit to run the farm program. So we need a lot of things in places. We need a lot of different agencies in place to make that happen. Innovation is also very important. Farmers are constantly looking at ways of making their operations more efficient, looking at their products and trying to maybe do some value add. What I mean by value add is they're taking their product and processing and making it into something that the consumer can use. And then the final one is the safety net, and that safety net is what we do in the Farmville to help keep our farmers going from day to day, or from year to year, or even several years at a time. If there's issues that come along where they need support, then that's part of the program. So when we think of the farm program, a lot of times we think of the farm program as being for farmers. But as you can see up here, it's almost 80% of the farm program actually is helping with nutritional needs across this country. And so you can see that food stamps, SNAP is another one that is very common. A lot of our dollars in the farm program go just to that, just to the nutritional needs of us across the country. So then the second is the crop insurance. And crop insurance has changed over time, and I don't know if either one of you want to speak to our crop insurance a little bit, but our government program does provide some crop insurance. One of the things that's most recent is that in the crop insurance, vegetable production has been added. So it's another part of. Before that, there's a group of types of crops that we could actually have through federal crop insurance, but vegetable production and berry production was not before. But that's one of those that hits me because it gives me the opportunity to have some protection in case I have a loss of my products. Crop insurance.
Well, I'll just add one thing to, is that me? Farming it's a risky business. Always has been and always will be. And one of a farmer's main ways of handling that risk is through insurance and crop insurance. And because it's such a high risk venture, crop insurance premiums standing by themselves for a lot of farmers would really be out of reach to pay that premium. And that is one of the reasons why the federal government subsidizes that premium to the tune of 60%, somewhere in there, 65%, and then the farmer pays the remaining amount of that premium to get that coverage. So, and that's been up and down over the years, but it is a huge benefit to farms that subsidizing the crop insurance premiums.
Do you all understand what we're talking about when we say crop insurance? So there are reasons why a farmer would need to insure their crop. It's not necessarily like for the farmer's personal safety. There's lots of, so a farmer spends all his money up front in the spring to plant the crop to pay for his fuel and things, but he doesn't get any money back until he harvests it or she harvests it in the fall. And there are lots of ways that an entire crop can be lost. It could be hailed on and ruined, it could be flooded by rain, and so a farmer buys a crop insurance policy so that even if they lose their crop, they still can get some money back to live on and to keep farming for the next spring.
I might add, as far as crop insurance goes, crop insurance products that producers are dealing with today are probably more based on revenue than it has been in the past. What I mean by revenue is most producers today, when they insure a crop, they're basically trying to cover base revenue that particular commodity is going to produce. Granted, it doesn't cover it all. I think under federal crop insurance, it covers approximately 82% of a loss compared on total gross revenue. So if you were to compare it to something, it's a lot like with your car insurance. You have deductions or deductibles. So if you totally destroy your vehicle, you're not going to get what you think the full value of it is. They're going to take off depreciation, they're going to take off other things. But if you look at today's producers with crop insurance, I'd say look at it in that venue.
So I think we'll just kind of move maybe right into one of the, some questions related to the book. I think before we move on, I think that's an interesting slide though, because a lot of people think, when we think federal farm program, that's all money that goes directly to farmers. 20% probably has some direct aid to farm families. 80% is going to other things, and in particular the SNAP program and food stamps and those types of things to help make food affordable for families that maybe their income would otherwise, where would they find the food, how could they afford the food? So think about that a little bit in terms of federal farm policy. There are misperceptions there. So one of the implications by the author, I referenced that a little bit earlier, is that it is because of the federal farm program that farms have gotten larger and also big agribusiness. And I'm going to ask our panel members maybe to share their thoughts, because farm sizes have increased not only here in North Dakota but across the country. And so what are some of the reasons? The author, I think, tends to jump mainly to specifically identifies agribusiness and farm programs, but we think it's a little bit more complicated than that. So what would be yours? What have you seen that has caused farm sizes to get so much larger?
Yeah, you know, when I look back, I did just a little study that went quite a ways back, and some of the statistics, ag statistics, and back in the early 1900s, the very early 1900s, average farm size was 9 acres. And that's, you know, it's rather hard to believe that it was only 9 acres back in that time. But we have to think about the tools and the resources the farmers had back then. And, you know, a lot of it was done with horses, a lot of it was done by hand. Back then they didn't have the pesticides to control the weeds, and they had a lot of issues with just working with the horses and trying to get enough land covered in the course of a day. And then I look forward to 1960. Well, really between 1920 and 1960, tractors really hit the farming sector. And so as the tractors hit the sector, what that did is it gave an individual the opportunity to cover more acres in the course of a day than they did with a horse. And looking back in about 1960, we were up to about 300 acres a day, or 300 acres per farm. And so you can see that there was quite an increase of the number of acres. And Since that time, we went from, in the 1960s, I know a large tractor was about 80 horsepower, 80, 90 horsepower. And I know growing up on the farm, I remember late 60s when we had a couple of tractors. One was just a little under 100 and one was about 110. We thought those were huge back then. And then about the same time, then we started getting some of the larger four-wheel drive tractors. But today we talk about 400 or 500 horsepower tractors, so there's considerable difference in the size of the tractors. There's a lot of difference in how much ground can be covered in the course of the day by one individual. And I believe that is one of the issues why farms have gotten bigger.
Yeah, I would agree with Keith along those lines, and along with just the size and the mechanizations, the technology involved with it too, I think has made a big difference. One of the other points I guess I was going to make is well, a couple of things, I guess. I think there are just fewer people that really want to farm today than there was 50 years ago. Farming has traditionally, we've had some good years the last few years. Traditionally, farming has not been a big money-making business, and that's why we've seen a huge exodus over time of people moving away from the farms, taking jobs at cities and towns and stuff in industry, and so I think there are just fewer and fewer people out there that want to farm, and that's just one of many reasons why farms that are out there have gotten bigger. And I relate it, I mentioned that as from a dairy farm, and so I kind of relate it from a different point of view. Usually we think of this increase in farm size. I think most of us, first thing we think about is the grain farming and the acres. Dairy farming over the years, like I say, I grew up in it, and I was a dairy farmer for 22 years. Federal farm programs did not have a great effect on us. We didn't really get any money out of it. There was some policies going on behind the scenes to try and help markets and so forth, I guess. And yet, what has happened to the dairy industry? There is not, I think there's one dairy north of Highway 2 in North Dakota. When I quit farming, there was about 400 dairy farms in North Dakota. Now there's less than 100. I think it's 80 or 75 or something. They've gotten bigger, much, much bigger, for a lot of other reasons than just federal farm policy. And I really think it's part of the picture, but there's a lot of other things going on too. So.
I'd like to add the perspective of the small vegetable growers and the small grain farmers. I think as farming overall has gotten bigger, it becomes harder and harder to go back to doing things on a small scale because the resources and infrastructure are all geared towards big. So, and part of that's just economy of scale. If it takes you the same or just a little more time and energy to do a big acreage as a small acreage, why wouldn't you do a big acreage? Labor is expensive. If you can, a small farm might need to hire an assistant, but their end sales are going to be much lower, so they're going to have a harder time paying for that extra help. And then transportation costs. I know that in the town where I grew up, our grain elevator no longer operates, and I see most of the neighbors have to have big semi-trucks rather than, that carry, I don't even know how many bushels a semi-truck carries. So if you have to travel further to sell your crop, you're going to be more inclined to grow more acres and afford a semi-truck to truck that crop to a market. Whereas before you could use a smaller grain truck, plant fewer acres, and take it to the nearby town, which limits farmers' ability to grow diverse crops. I planted buckwheat this year. I can't sell my 10 acres of buckwheat because you have to have a contract with an elevator that's like in Grand Forks or somewhere equally distant. So I have to use my buckwheat myself, which is why I have a milling business. So it limits people's initiative to grow more diverse crops, because it's a lot harder to grow small acres and to grow different things aside from the wheat, the flax, the soybeans and the corn that the local elevators are used to dealing with.
If I could add one more thing, if you could go back to the previous slide, and I want to somewhat indirectly relate the Farm Bill to what we do today, but if you look at a couple of them, if you look at research, we've spent billions and billions of dollars in this country to improve our crops that we have today that I talked about earlier. Along with that, we've spent some of that money to improve the equipment that helps us grow more crops, more bushels per acre, and also increases the size of the farm. So the federal program has really done a lot indirectly through research to increase the size of our farms also.
So let's talk about some specifics. Again, the federal farm program, even though the bulk of the dollars go towards other types of programs, there are earmarks, or there are dollars that are directly allocated for insurance programs and support to farmers. One of the things that we have available to us through our farm business management program is that as you work with farmers, you track numbers and you actually see what kind of an impact it makes on a farmer's bottom line. So let's talk a little bit about what you've learned in terms of what would happen if the farm program wasn't here. And I think those dollars will show kind of what the impact is on making some of these farm businesses sustainable. So I'm going to turn it over to the farm business management instructor just to walk us through that a little bit.
Okay. We in farm business management, couple. There. Can you hear me okay?
No, not really. Not the other way.
Okay, now you can hear me. Okay, one of the things we do in the farm business management program is produce annual averages, and they're based strictly on the numbers from the students we work with. One of the things that we do over the course of time is keep track of this information. Dr. Migler, if you could move back one slide, please. Oops.
Forward?
I guess forward.
This one?
Okay, the slide that we have on the screen right now is really a summary from our averages for Region 2 in North Dakota. Region 2 is basically the upper north central part of North Dakota. As you can see, since 1989 up to this last year and everything, you pretty much see what the net farm income that the average producers were receiving in the area. There was a couple of, or a few years particularly, starting back in 2007, 8, 9, well 9 was a little bit lower and everything, but you pretty much get the idea of what the average farm producer in the area has received as farm profitability. Let me back up a second. Do all of you know what, when I use the term farm profitability, really is made up of? I'll just give you a quick summary of it. We measure a business called an area in the business called farm profitability. Farm profitability is made up of not only the cash income that they received during the year, and then you have the cash expenses. including interest and everything else. From that area there, that's called net cash farm income. The rest of the profitability in a business is made up of the changes of inventory within the business. The difference between how much inventory of crops you had at the beginning of the year compared to what you had at the end of the year. How much breeding livestock you had at the beginning of the year as compared to what you had at the end of the year. That would make up part of it. And the last part of it is what happens to the change in value of the capital assets such as land, machines, things of that nature. And if you add up all of the positives and take away all the negatives through that long list, you end up with your net farm income. That's just a quick explanation. It's not what I hear a lot of my producers say. It's not their Schedule F, which is their tax depreciation they end up paying or they base what they're going to pay to the federal government or the state government as far as their taxes go. But as you can see, we did have some very good years here. Starting in about 2007, there was a little flip here and there, and all the way up into probably the golden year, which is 2012, which we saw incomes, gross incomes in the average farms that we were dealing with here in North Dakota set this massive all-time highs, and it also was seen pretty much, well, it was seen all throughout the United States. Could you back up that one slide? Okay. If we were to look at what impact government payments had on this over the course of time and everything, as you can see, since when we started the data in 1989 all throughout, government program payments have been a significant amount of the farm profit that a lot of our producers are dealing with. Some of the years, probably not as high. We did see an unreal increase in the amount of government payments that were going to the average producer back in 1999. In fact, Rodney and I were visiting about that earlier this morning, and a lot of that goes back to a part of the Farmville back then that was called loan deficiency payment. And what happened at that time, we were seeing a large decrease in the overall commodity prices, and because of a large decrease in commodity prices, that kicked in what was called a loan deficiency payment that basically was generated because of low commodity prices. And in the Farm Bill, there was an item called target prices that were established in the Farm Bill for such commodities as wheat, corn, and soybeans that were quite a bit higher than what the market was at that time, and because the result of that, it definitely did generate very, very large payments. We saw some major changes in the Farm Bill starting around the year 2002, which we saw a Farm Bill that moved from production-orientated items more to a Farm Bill today that encompasses risk management issues and also anyway, what happened in the Farm Bill during that time, we moved away from a production-based type of a Farm Bill to what we see today as more of a risk management issue. and also changed how a lot of the payments that were going to producers. In the present Farmville, what we're seeing was before, all payments prior to 2002 were all based totally on farm businesses' established yields, and those issues were dictated by that. In 2002, with the change in the Farm Bill, basically what happened was they moved away from those production issues from the standpoint that they decoupled the program payments from having to raise X amount of acres of wheat, and X amount of acres of corn, and right on down the line. Now, all farm producers, they can raise whatever they want because their history of their business is what actually produces the farm program payments that we see today. They also took how the payments are being generated. In the Farm Bill we're presently under right now, there's two acronyms that every producer pretty much is used to right now. One is called the PLC, and that particular payment is totally generated on price. The other payment that you might hear the acronym ARC. That particular payment is generated not only by established program or established yield that individual producer has, but also that one is dictated by what's called a weighted marketing year average price. So it takes a lot longer to generate those payments. Anyway, by decoupling those payments, today's producers, they don't have to raise their 200 acres of corn or their 3,000 acres of wheat that they've established as their history. They can raise whatever. They can raise soybeans. They can raise any number of dry edible beans, from pinnos to navies to right on down the line. So really, when we look at today's farm program as really established here, as you can see, up to this last year, in every one of those years, the overall net farm income that producers were receiving over these course of years, farm program payments has had a significant role in what they end up receiving. Can you give me the next slide? Or one by that? Okay. If we were to take out the net, or take out the farm program payments now, and just divorce ourselves from that totally, the average farm producer, if you didn't have any government program payments, as you can see this last year, they definitely did post a loss. Without those farm program payments as their safety net, shall we say, they would have ended up in a negative situation. If you look at it there, and if you look at it in the next slide, if they also had an issue called crop insurance taken away, their losses would have been quite a bit higher. But if we go back...
Okay, I'm gonna...
Thank you.
Right there. Okay.
If we look at it from an overall trend over the years, farm program payments and crop insurance really has been a most welcome safety net to the overall structure of the farm business, as you can see, because without it, there was quite a few years where the net farm income would have been almost nil to a negative situation. There was significant years, at least 3-4 years that I can see offhand, where issues of government payments and crop insurance payments definitely added a lot to the overall profitability of the business. If you look, if you want to back up one, or go back to that right there, thank you. If you look at, just looking at net farm income without government payments, that has an impact all the way through the slide. And if you move forward, Dr. Migler, that one, whoops, back up one.
Right here.
If you look at just the net farm income without government payments and crop insurance, those two issues alone have a very big impact. Now, I know for a fact that, yes, this issue alone, crop insurance and government payments have led to a lot of debate over the years from the standpoint of the farm population to the urban population. They pointed that out many times, where they said, yeah, these farmers all got all these payments and everything. And
Just to comment on that, without the government payments or insurance income, from 97 to 2001, farmers had losses every year.
oh, definitely.
And without those, we would have no farmers. We would not.
No,
We wouldn't be here.
I'm wondering, as you look at this, it almost raises an interesting situation, because the author says it's the farm program that makes farmers, that causes agriculture to get big. But you could also argue that without the farm program, we'd have a lot more producers that would have gone out of business, and the remaining farmers would have gotten bigger. So to some degree, it kind of goes against what the author is saying, because with the federal farm program keeping some producers, allowing them to remain viable, you have more farm families, and consequently the farm size doesn't get bigger. It just seems contradictory to what the author is saying in the book.
As you brought that up too, if you call back what you read in the book, particularly when she was discussing her interaction with the rancher out of New Mexico. And one of the things that sticks out in my mind is the comment in there about because there are less ranchers in that area, people leaving the business over the course of time has led to a lot of times the downfall in local communities. And I think that was very significant, that particular area of the book. As you also, you can say, yeah, but those farmers, they were receiving payments for what? It's kind of funny, in the role I serve as a farm management teacher, I'm talking with a lot of my clients, in some years those payments probably didn't hold the same significance of value to them as probably in the years when we had lower commodity prices.
I'm just watching the clock. One of the things that we might want to talk about before we run out of time is the change on the farm program. And we probably won't be able to cover all of these, but I think this is particularly interesting to talk about. And these are real data that show the impact of what would happen if the farm program went away. I don't know if you're grasping kind of the significance. This is new to me, having actually seen all of this data. But we would have had farm families go out of business without question had it not been for the federal farm program, based on the information that we're seeing here. You talked a little bit about, some of you talked about a safety net, and I think that this really illustrates that. And that's kind of how a lot of people in the agricultural world look at the farm program. But it seems like there have been a number of changes, and there has been some movement towards support for smaller producers. And maybe in the time that we have left, we could talk a little bit about that. And I think maybe Keith and Stephanie might be able to address some of the things that you've seen in terms of the federal farm program that way.
So, I've been
working at the college since 2013, so I'm really only going to speak about the 2014 Farm Bill, and Keith can talk about how things were in the past. But I can tell you how they are now, and that is that of the, was it 900 billion in the total Farm Bill over 10 years, there is 501.5 million for the first 5 years that is just for local food, rural development, organic agriculture, and healthy food access initiatives. So those are funds that are more for not a 10,000 acre wheat farm, but more for a 5 acre vegetable farm. Or an urban farm that's, teaching low-income teenagers how to grow food for their own families. Programs like that. And so when I'm talking about a small farmer, I'm talking about just a few acres, usually fruits and vegetables, but not only fruits and vegetables. This includes farm businesses, cheesemakers, meat producers, wineries, distilleries, even some forest products. The point of these funds is to increase the availability of farm products and increase the consumption of those products. That means that the USDA wants there to be more small farms and more small farm businesses, and they want Americans to be eating more locally grown, American-grown fruits, vegetables, meat, cheese, wine, etc. So these funds support programs that provide business training to small farmers. They reimburse the cost of getting certified as an organic grower. That can cost up to $4,000 for a farm. They allow farmers to pay for personnel, pay for assistants, pay for marketing, packaging, create cooperatives, work together with other farmers to more effectively get their products to customers. These programs also address poverty and hunger by getting locally grown produce to low-income people. And they pay for research into new farming techniques. So one example is a grant called the Value-Added Producer Grant. Both Keith and I have gotten this grant in 2015 for our individual businesses. Me for Meadowlark Granary, my milling and bakery business. Keith for his Aspen Aquaponics business, which raises vegetables and fish. And we were two of about 250 farms across the nation that got these grants. And then it funded a huge variety of things. On the list I saw goat milk truffles, beef producers, people who were harvesting timber and turning it into pallets, peach growers who were turning peach wood into charcoal briquettes for smoking, honey growers producing beeswax and honey wine, distilleries, people selling chili powder, sauerkraut fermented foods, green tea, jams and jellies, and even dairies turning the manure from their cattle into methane to produce electricity. So this small amount of funding that has been added to the Farm Bill for small producers, and it's in 2014 it was about 50% more funding for small farms than it was in 2008. This small amount of money is making a pretty big impact.
It is, and there's other areas too. We're looking more closely at food safety now than we have looked at before. If I just go back, and I'm just going to, Dr. Migley, just briefly talk about this slide here and kind of flow into it. But back in the late 1800s, we started to look at agriculture, and we started to put acts in place, Congress did, to look at, to control and to do different things for the farming sector. And in the beginning, it was mainly concerned with collecting farm data, and it was also concerned about, very concerned about processing and how we raised animals. And so some of the early acts had a lot to do with meat inspection and that type of thing. And then as the farm sizes grew, we realized we had conservation issues. and you maybe heard of the dirty 30s. And back in the dirty 30s, we didn't have a lot of our land covered. We were rapidly doing a lot of what we call fallow. We were keeping our soil black when we weren't seeding it. And so then we had issues with wind erosion and water erosion. So we had conservation practices that were put in place, and farmers had the opportunity to use those conservation practices. And then if you get, as we go down in time, I remember one in the middle 60s because I mentioned I was in the egg laying business. We had an egg laying operation, but in the middle 60s, all of a sudden there came in an act about the quality of an egg. And so it just, all the way up until that point in time, it had a lot to do with the quality of food and trying to set some regulations in place. But then in 1966 is when the Child Nutrition Act came in place. And so, as we know today, that's a very huge part of the food nutrition program. In 1973, and Al mentioned this, we established some target prices and deficiency payments. And then we also started the commodity food program, where we actually had food available to individuals in low income. And then 1980 was the federal crop insurance program. We talked a little bit about the crop insurance program. 85, again, there's the Animal Welfare Act. I don't know if you've maybe seen pictures or videos of how some of the livestock that were being butchered were being handled, but that was one of the things that brought that up. 1990, the Organic Act was put in place for organic certification. And organic farming had gone on for many, many years before that, but it was actually put in place as a regulatory in 1990. And in 2000, then the Ag Risk Protection Act that Al talked a little bit about, it became more of a multi-year thing, so that if a farmer had a loss 1 year, that they followed through and they were able to get some benefits if they had continued to have issues. And then, of course, 2005 is when we had the energy issue, and energy is a very important part of the Farm Bill too. The energy got thrown in there someplace along the way, and so we've heard of biodiesel, we've heard of different biofuels. Well, that's all part of that. And then, of course, we've talked about the 2014 Ag Act, but I will stop there.
So if you're saying when we fill up with gas and almost everything up here's got 10% ethanol in it, so I guess it's an interesting point that you may think that this farm policy thing really doesn't impact me at all. Just think about that. Look at the fuel pump the next time you fill up with gas for your car and check, and you'll see that it says this gasoline has 10% ethanol, and that's tied to federal farm plan. Looking at the clock, or I guess I've run out of time. I just wanted to ask, are there any questions? And kind of, I would say, is kind of listening and hearing, that going back to the original intent of a session like this is to say, so the author makes some assumptions, makes some statements in the book, deeply rooted. And I think what I would just ask, as you're reading the book, or if you've read the book, kind of contrast what you heard today with what the author is saying. And I think it kind of points out there's just a lot of different ways of looking at this. One of the things I'm seeing is, I go back to, I said this earlier, and the author makes the case, well, federal farm policy, agribusiness, they're driving bigger and bigger farms, and I'm saying almost the opposite here, that if it wasn't for federal farm policy, we'd have fewer farms, they would probably even been bigger. Now that's a judgment call. But again, I think that's what, as you look at this book, you want to have that critical analysis. Any questions? We've got a lot of expertise here. These are people that are working, involved in agriculture, working with farm families. Related to the book, anything that you've heard today? I want to thank them, Rodney, Al, Keith, Stephanie, for sharing your expertise. And I would just make that one last point, that it is really true, the food that you have today, and the terms of the prices we pay, the availability that we have, is all impacted by federal farm policy. There really is nothing closer to home than when we were eating 3 meals a day, and there are policies that are being directed towards how can we keep family farmers, how can we have the availability, how can we have nutrition, how can we provide resources for people that can't afford food. That's all tied to federal farm policy. So even though we may not think it's a big deal, it actually kind of is. So thanks for taking the time to be with us. If you want to stop and ask any of our panel members questions, I'm sure we'll stick around for a little bit and have some, enjoy your food.